Yes, Catherine. It is a giant D20. So I have been thinking about making this video for the last couple of days. And I understand a lot of us are really tired about talking about the sad puppies. I don't want to make this really about the sad puppies. Instead, I think that this is really a good opportunity for us as a community to talk about polarization. So for those of you who are maybe not as up to date on what's happening with the Hugo Awards this year, the Sad Puppy and Rabid Puppy slates are lists of ideal nominees, right? Ideal nomination lists that were hosted by two different groups. One is the Sad Puppies and one is the Rabid Puppies. Both groups advocated that you vote for their exact slate to get on the ballot. In a lot of cases, they advocated that you do this regardless of whether you had read those books or not. And their biggest claim and their biggest upset that they said that they were upset about was that conservatives are not being given awards anymore. That in a lot of ways they believe it is a liability to a new author to be openly conservative in their political beliefs. On top of that, they have made claims that the Hugo Awards has become almost exclusively a literary award instead of awarding kind of more swashbuckling, buxom women kind of stories. And this has caused a lot of controversy, not only because some of the people associated with these slates, in particular people like Vox Day, have said some really terrible and racist and misogynist things. And of course, the use of slates is kind of counter to the historical and traditional way that we have gone about awarding the Hugo Awards. It's in the past been a process by which kind of the fans all get together and vote for what they think was the best of the year, instead of what somebody has said they should vote for. In the aftermath of all of this, there has been a lot of conflict and controversy and increasingly polarized groups. Polarization is, by and large, the process whereby two opposed groups will become increasingly hostile towards one another over time. This is kind of results in increasingly radicalized factions within a community. Now, most often we associate this with politics. If you are part of American politics or are familiar with some of the more nationalist movements in Europe, this is not an unfamiliar idea to you. What's kind of strange about it for, I think, a lot of SFF fans is that it is filtering into the science fiction and fantasy community in a way that we have not seen. We have not in the past seen a widespread usage of slates to take over the nominating process of our award system. And of course, this has led to a lot of upset. But what I want to talk about today is not so much the Sad Puppies themselves as the process by which people become radicalized within a community, by which they become polarized within a community. Now, the Sad Puppy slate simply couldn't have happened before the internet age. The internet age is kind of known far and wide for connecting people who otherwise would not have had a way to find one another. Or at the very least, it would have been extremely difficult to do so. My goal in filming this is really to connect you with some interesting think pieces about how this happens. And so I think that going with the internet age kind of first is a really great jumping off point here. Now, the book that I'm going to recommend for this in particular is a book that I've recommended before. That's The Revolution Will Not Be Televised by Joe Trippi. This is about one of the very first times that the internet was used as a driving force in a political campaign. In particular, that campaign of Howard Dean. Before the Dean campaign, no one was leveraging the internet, at least in American politics, for their own benefit. the Dean campaign, really kind of by chance, started to connect these communities of Dean supporters using forums to really capitalize on trying to get the Democratic nomination and trying to get the presidency. Joe Trippi, I think, is really a great starting point for learning more about this internet usage for campaigning. He is witty and funny and extremely intelligent. And his story is one that shows, I think, in a really interesting and developed way, the growth of the internet as a community building tool. One of the things that I think a lot of people are concerned about with the internet is that people talk really only to the people who agree with them. And you'll hear this all the time. Oh, they only ever go to Fox News. Oh, they only ever, go on these obscure blogs. And that's not necessarily an untrue thing. The problem with doing that is that you get echo chambers in your life. So we've all had this experience where you talk to somebody who agrees with you, and in the process of talking to someone who agrees with you, you both get so worked up eventually you're shouting. I know this has happened to me on numerous occasions where all of a sudden what was started out as a normal conversation became me shouting and yelling and the person with me shouting and yelling, even though we're absolutely agreeing with one another. Diana Mutz is a political scientist and communications professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Her book on this is absolutely fantastic. It's under 150 pages. And she talks about this exact phenomenon. When your community is composed of people who believe the same things you believe, members of that community, yourself included, will drive themselves towards more and more extreme points of view. She also, I think, brings up a really interesting counterexample, which is that if you are the one person in that community who does not agree, you're also going to become more and more extreme because of a perceived hostility, right? You perceive that everyone around you disagrees with you, even if, the truth of the matter is that most people, don't really care one way or another, or most people actually agree with you. You perceive yourself as being alone and being kind of the target of a hostile group. I think this is really important to keep in mind in any discussion that we have about the sad puppies. The community in question believes that the system at large is against them. Regardless of whether this is true or not, that perception is reinforced every time that somebody says, you're just a bigot, or you're just a homophobe, or you're just a whatever that might be. Regardless of whether you or them is correct in the absolute facts of the population and dynamics of the Hugo Awards or the science fiction community at large, that perception magnifies any hostility you might have. And this brings me to kind of my final recommendation. One of the most fundamental works in political science and economics and sociology is a book called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty by a guy named Albert O. Hirschman. This is, again, a book that's under 120 pages. And what Hirschman talks about is that when you're a member of a community, if you think that people aren't listening to you and you don't want to leave your community, you have two options. You can talk really, really loudly, or you start doing increasingly crazy things, right? This is how we wind up with revolutions. And I think this is an important thing to remember when we're talking in particular about the sad puppies. By the way, fantastic. If you can't tell, I absolutely love this. It's definitely worth the read if you're going to do anything involving management or business, or basically if you're ever going to interact with people. But I think these ideas are really important to keep in mind with the sad and rabbit puppy slate folks. Even if you don't agree with what they're saying, it is such a good thing that they are still a part of our community. And here's why. if you do not agree with them and you come to them with a calm demeanor and an open ear and mind, if you let people talk, they want to remain a part of your community and they will feel like they have a voice in the system. This book is entirely about what people do and do not do when they have a voice in the system, right? When they feel like they are being heard, they are much more likely to come to compromise. And I think that that's a great way to frame the attitude that we have in approaching the Sad Puppy Slate. In particular, I have a really hard time being patient with people I don't agree with. You know, especially if you are going on and I find you just, I find that over time, or if I'm in a bad mood, I can be very abrasive towards people I don't necessarily agree with. I can be short-tempered. And this is something that I think as a community we can work on together. You want to remain open-armed to people who disagree with you, even if they disagree with you in extremely radical and objectionable ways. This is because those people are either going to do increasingly crazy things, or they're going to realize that people aren't actually against them. They're going to realize that the kind of echo chamber that they have going on isn't reflective of real life, or they're going to realize that they can come to a compromise with the system itself and make it work in a better way. Regardless of if the Sad Puppy group is right about if conservatives and literary fiction writers have taken over the Hugo Awards, coming to a better understanding of one another is always going to be a good thing. And it is always going to lead to a more compromising and empathetic community. And that's really what I want. I don't know about you. I don't care if everyone agrees with me. What I want is for people in my community to be respectful. I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts. And some light reading, really under 600 pages. This is shorter than a Sanderson novel, of works that you can read if you are interested in polarization itself. If you have any other suggestions, I'm pretty limited in the books that I have read. And I would love to get more suggestions on different kinds of reading about different groups and about the way people approach one another. If you have any really good history of science fiction books, I would love that too. I don't know. Share your thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking. I hope you're having a fantastic weekend. I'll talk to you later. Bye.